chat for that. If there's anyone who hasn't actually taught this qualification yet, could you please tap into your chat for that? But it looks like everyone has been doing it for at least 1 or 2 years or more. And the second point is whether your students were entered for the exam in 2012. Okay, so it looks like majority of you actually, well, I say the vast majority of you has got good experience with this specification, and most of you also have had candidates entered for the exam last year. Just before we start, we have one more poll, and if you can bring it on, and that is what you're hoping to get out of this session. For this one, you will actually have to type in your own answers, because it's not something, there's no sort of options offered for you. So if you want to type in the chat box. Okay, so we've got someone to know how we evaluate the written assessment, how to maximize achievement in our teaching, how to set the assessment, best ability to mark. Someone commented about being sure when giving a grade. Now, by grade, we won't be using today, we won't be referring to grade as A, B, C, D as much, because obviously they can slightly vary from one year to another one. But we'll be looking at marks and total marks rather. Pre-planning. So most of you seem to be actually more interested in the writing than the speaking, which is quite interesting, mainly because the writing is actually marked by the PSEL, while the speaking is marked by yourselves. But these are all sort of, hopefully will all be covered by the aims and objectives of today. So if we can, and if you can get rid of the polls and get back to the presentation. So what we'll do today, as I say, we're going to look, first we're going to look at the principles behind the specification and how it's organized, and then we'll do some sample marking for both the speaking and the writing. We'll try to do, say, the first hour on the speaking, and then we'll have a quick break about 5 o'clock, and then get on with the writing. Now, as you all have been teaching for at least 1 or 2 years, you are probably already familiar with the specification. So you know that both control assessment, whether it's the speaking or the writing, they refer to 4 themes, which we can see on the slide now: media and culture, sport and leisure, travel and tourism, and business work and employment. Plus there is a center-devised option that basically anything that doesn't come under these headings you can do as a center-devised option. Typical subtopics are, for example, school life, which is not in any of these themes anymore, or daily life, for example. So obviously the fact that you can choose you can choose one of these themes or more than one. Obviously your candidates will have to do 2 tasks for the speaking and 2 tasks for the writing. They can all come from the same theme, or you can use different ones. There's no rule, so you can go for depth or you can go for more variety. It's entirely up to you. Also, the fact that you can choose the tasks and the themes means that you can sort of cater for the sort of stretch and challenge, because obviously you can set more difficult tasks for the ones that the very able candidates, and you can set simpler tasks for candidates with more limited language. One example could be, for I don't know, for something that could stretch a candidate is talking about the environment, while someone with more limited language skills might be better off talking about home, family, and friends. Okay. Now, as we were saying before, the speaking is made up of 2 tasks, and you have to choose, for your candidates, you have to choose 2 different tasks from a selection of 3 types. The first one is a picture-based discussion. Now, picture-based discussion, basically the student choose a picture or a photograph that relates to something that interests them. It could be a photograph from, their own photograph, it could be from the holidays, from a school day or something like that, or it could be someone totally unrelated to their own life. It could be a famous person, something that is aligned to the themes that we see in the previous page. Then students can give a presentation of up to a minute if they want to, although it's not required, but it should be no more than a minute in the picture-based discussion. Then we've got the presentation and follow-up discussion, which is, again, about something that relates to one of the themes. And they should have now, the timing here is fairly important. We'll see it again later when we do some sample marking. They should give a presentation 2 or 3 minutes maximum. It shouldn't go, the initial presentation shouldn't go over 3 minutes. And then if they do less than that, even 1 minute is fine. After the presentation, however, the students must respond to a series of questions to ensure the ability to to show that they can deal with unpredictable elements. So it's presentation and discussion, not just the presentation. The third type is open interaction, which is basically a kind of unscripted role play. As we said before, both tasks can relate to one theme if you want to, but otherwise they can be on different themes, entirely up to you. Also, you will have to submit 2 tasks for each, submit marks for 2 tasks for your students. However, there's no limit to how many you carry out with your students, obviously within the time constraints of your teaching. If you do more than 2, however, you will have to submit the marks for the best 2 only. Okay. And what is important is that you have to submit 2 different tasks. Some students will have to do, it's a choice of 2 out of 3. So the most popular ones are the picture-based discussion and the presentation. So that you can just do those 2, but otherwise you can do picture-based and open interaction as you like, but it's got to be 2 different ones. Also, one thing that's not at times terribly clear is what you have to submit. So you will have to send, let's say, you have to carry out 2 different tasks with each candidate, and you only have to send evidence. You will have to send marks for both tasks. No, one candidate takes 2 tasks. You will have to send the marks for both, but you only have to send 1 recording per candidate. However, you must make sure that you send off evidence of 2 different types of tasks. So for, let's say you're doing a picture-based discussion and a presentation, you will have to send off some examples of picture-based discussions, and you will also have to send off some examples of presentation and discussion. So there's evidence of both. The tasks, each one, whichever it is, doesn't matter whether it's presentation, discussion or open interaction, will take between 4 and 6 minutes, and it's got to be done in controlled conditions, of which we see more later. The main thing is that, yes, it's center assessed, so you will have to mark the task, and Edexcel will only moderate a sample. But so the initial marking will be yours, and if you're marking the sample, the sample that you sent off marked by yourself is all within tolerance, then that's all. That's it. Edexcel will accept all your marks. We'll look at the mark schemes in more detail when you do the sample marking, but just to stress one fact is that the emphasis is on communication. When you look at the grids later on, we will see that 60% of the total mark is given to communication, while the range of language and the accuracy of language count for 20%. Now, how to carry on with how to organize your speaking assessment. So first of all, you have to set the task. Now, for the interactions only, Edexcel provides some stimulus material which you can download from the website, secure download. Now you can use them entirely as they are, or if you prefer, you can adapt them. You can change some bullet points, remove a bullet point, add another one, or else you can create entirely your own. And that certainly applies to the picture-based discussion and the picture-based discussion, yes, and the presentation, where you're free to choose together with your students what topics they want to talk about and how to organize the presentation. The idea, however, is to provide opportunities for stretch and challenge, as we were saying before. A well-able candidate should be doing something slightly more, that will stretch them further, while a sort of weaker candidate should do a simpler task. The stimulus can be written in English or in Italian, as you prefer. If you write your own, whether it's whichever task you are preparing yourself, there's no need for Excel to approve it. However, you can send it off to the Ask the Experts facility to double check if everything is okay. Again, we'll have a slide later on with that. If the tasks have to be, however, refreshed every 2 years, that means you have to change some of the bullet points, and the Excel one are also refreshed, but they're actually changed, they're produced every 2 years. That's for both speaking and writing. In the next slide, we have one example of a presentation and discussion, for example, the world of work. An experience you have had at work, so this gives you the candidate the opportunity to write about the past tense, which job or career you hope to do in the future, and why allows for to use the future, or at least refer to the future. We'll see later that when we talk about future tense, they don't need necessarily to use the future tense. They can just use other strategies like the conditional vorrei, intendo, spero di, and other phrases, as long as they obviously are able to refer them to the future. Then any job they would like to do, and why, so that caters for the opinion, and importance of money when choosing a job, which is a more difficult bullet point, which maybe we'll only use for the stronger candidate, not for all. But as I say, you got there with the control assessment, you can target the assessment to the level of the student. Another example that's very popular, although it's not one of the themes, but it's one of the center-based option, is school life. Center-devised option is a school life, so describe your school, which can be done by every candidate, because it often could just be a list of facilities for the weaker ones. What you like and dislike about school, so again, opinion, recent activities that allows them to show the past tense. What do you change about your school, which is again stretching them a little bit, and then plans for the future, again showing again the future tense. These are just examples, but you may find them useful to plan your own things, because what we're looking at is a variety of tenses and variety of lexis and structures. So ideally, having a variety of tenses, like something in the present tense, like describe your school, something about the past tense, what you've done recently, something about the future plans, and perhaps something a bit more challenging, like what would you change, what advice would you give, possibly require them to use the conditional. Some basic ones like sarebbe meglio. We don't require very, very complex sentences, but obviously the more variety the better. Now, this was about task setting. Now, task taking, how the task actually takes place. So obviously you teach a certain theme, or they need to teach them vocabulary. Let's say holidays, you teach them vocabulary, you teach them you practice different questions in class, practice similar tasks, and obviously there it's just your normal teaching, so you just can give them as much feedback as you like. The second phase is, however, setting the task. So you have to explain the task, and then the candidates will have time to prepare it. Now, during this phase, you're only allowed to give a limited amount of help. So all you can do is clarify the task for them. So, for example, remind your students of the language that they have covered recently that they will need to use in the task, or refer to any previous work that they may refer to in while preparing for the task. However, you cannot help them with the language. It's done under control conditions, so your input should only be clarifying the task for them. And remember that it's not set as homework. So now the time frame is that you should give it to them up to 2 weeks in advance, or a maximum of 6 teaching hours, depending on how your course is organized and how often you see your students. Obviously, this is the maximum amount available, so 2 weeks or 6 hours, but you're free to give less if appropriate. Equally, you may be wanting. We'll see later how you can carry them out, when you can carry them out. The candidates, however, are able, they can discuss with one another, and they can, they can write 30 words of notes, which they can take into the speaking test. Again, we'll see a little bit more on this later. But please do remember that the centres should keep these notes in the centre, just in case the board asks for them. You're not required to send them off with a recording, but you are required to keep them. Also, remember that you have to use the control assessment authenticity record sheet, which you can find in the specifications or on the guidance document. So this is a task taking when the student prepare for the task. Then we move to the actual conduct of the test, when, as I say, it's in control condition. So during the test, the candidates can only use the stimulus if it's relevant to the task, obviously, especially if it's an open interaction. There may not be much of a stimulus, for example, for the presentation or the picture-based discussion other than a photograph. And they can use the 30 words of notes that must be written on the Excel form, however. And then the task should last between 4 and 6 minutes. Less or more is penalizing. Less is obviously not enough language shown, and more than 6 minutes is counterproductive because the examiners will actually, the moderators will actually only listen to the first 6 minutes of it. And then you have to assess, you teachers will have to assess the tests and send them off to Excel for moderation. When to do it is up to you, because there's a lot of variety. Some people test on an ongoing basis as part of continuous learning. So as I say, you have to do a minimum of 2, but you can do 1 a month if you like, as many as you like. You can test in the classroom, you can test in a separate room. You can do both tests at the end, both tests one after the other in one sitting. It really depends on your circumstances and the kind of teaching you do, whether it's how many hours you have during the week, the age of your candidates. You may be teaching even adults, which you only see them once a week. It's entirely up to you. Now, pitfalls to avoid. We will see when we look at the mark schemes that one of the criteria to have good, to maximize marks is the ability to deal with the unpredictability. So try not to ask every student the same questions. Obviously, don't dominate the discussion. You've got to give the chance. The student should be the one that speaks the most, not you, teachers. Don't allow prepared speech without any questions, because all of the tasks require kind of discussion and interaction. So for this reason, it's better not to ask closed questions, but open questions. And you don't correct the students if they make a mistake. Tips you can mention for your students is, obviously, as we were saying before, try to include a variety of structures and tenses. That also depends, obviously, on how the task is set. Overall, it's probably better if you give them, especially if you're doing a presentation, it might be better for them to give them some bullet points to cover, as we've seen earlier in the examples, rather than just say to them, oh, talk about your school. If you give them some bullet points, it may be easier for them to include everything that they need, because as we said earlier, they need to include a variety of structures and tenses, and they need to include opinions. So to make sure that they cover all these, probably bullet points help. Obviously, they have to think carefully what they put in the 30 words of notes, and there's no rules on this. I mean, some other boards forbid full sentences, for example, conjugated verbs, but Excel only forbids codes. That means, for example, putting down the initial of the sentence or the words you're going to put in a sentence. If you're giving a presentation here, we say don't put all your eggs in one basket, meaning that if you have if you're doing a presentation, try, for student point of view, try not to say everything you have to say in the presentation, because otherwise you're going to run out of things in the following discussion. The same goes for the picture, and obviously the picture-based discussion is not just a description of the picture, but it's everything that arises from it. So it's a wider conversation about the theme that comes out from the picture. So, for example, if we have a picture of a holiday, obviously the candidate can describe where they are, where they were at the time of the picture, what's in the pictures, and so on. but they can then branch out to talk about holidays in general, what they like doing during the holidays, what would be their ideal holidays, and things like that. Finally, support for speaking. You can refer to, there's a lot of material available online. There's some sample assessment materials, there's a teacher's guide with some examples that you can listen to. GCSE Italian textbooks, so obviously there's none endorsed by the Excel, but there's a few on the markets. For example, Amici is one of the main ones that are being used because it's been designed with the GCSE exam in mind. And obviously there's, past exams can also be used and adapted to the new specifications. Now this is, I've finished with a sort of general presentation before we move on to the actual sample marking. So if you want to ask any questions on the task setting, the conduct of the exam or anything, perhaps this is a good time to ask. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any questions. Do feel free to ask, to type in a question while we're listening. What we'll do now, we're going to listen to some samples. Okay, we're going to listen to 3 samples. As I say, each test will take about 4 and 6 minutes. We're going to listen to some examples. Now, while we do this, I would like you to have in front of you the candidate the mark sheet, basically, for the speaking. Because while you're listening, I would like you to try to mark the extras that you hear. And so at the end of the listening of each extract, you have 3 polls that correspond to the grids in the mark scheme, and you have to choose a band. Okay. So if we can say, and if you can bring on the first listening extract. Okay, it's a picture-based discussion. Okay. And while you listen to it, I say keep an eye on the grids and see what marks you would award, or at least you can choose a band. Okay.
Picture-based discussion of a famous person. Buongiorno.
Buongiorno.
Come stai? Come stai? Bene?
Bene, grazie.
Bene. Allora, chi è nella tua foto?
Beyoncé.
Ok. Vuoi fare un'introduzione?
Questo è Beyoncé.
Sì.
Ho seguito perché lei è l'idol.
Sì.
Lei era il primo concerto. Ho visto in concerto.
Molto bene.
Ho seguito questo foto perché lei inguaia e Glastonbury e sembra elegante.
Bene, ok. Che lavoro fa come carriera?
Beyoncé è uno cantante.
Mi puoi descrivere com'è fisicamente nella foto?
Beyoncé è capella di Nicola. Lei ha le capelle lunghe.
Sì. Di che colore sono gli occhi?
Lei ha le occhi marrone.
Ok. Bene. E lei è alta o bassa?
Elle oltre le curve.
Sì. Ah, le curve. Le curve.
Sì.
Bene. E come di personalità?
Beyoncé ha una personalità differente e intelligente.
Bene. E lei ha una grande famiglia?
Ci sono 4 persone nella sua famiglia. Sua si chiama madre si Tina e sua padre si chiama Matthew.
Bene. Lei di che nazionalità?
Nazionalità è Beyoncé africano-americano.
Ok.
Le è di Tronte.
Ah, 30 anni. Bene. Che ha fatto nella sua carriera in passato?
Beyoncé per la prima volta nella una band, ragazza Destiny Child.
Ok. Bene. Ha cantato in dei concerti, dei concerti di musica, eccetera.
Aspetto Festival di Cimata de Massa.
Bene. Bene.
Questo è stato il più grande lavoro che avrà scritto.
Bene. Cosa pensi personalmente di Beyoncé?
Persona che Beyoncé è super fantante.
Okay, now this candidate opted for the very minimum amount, 4 minutes, and given the difficulty she had in expressing herself sometimes, it's probably understandable why she aimed for the minimum. In the meantime, we've been typing some questions, mainly if you have the specifications at hand, you find the same grid in the specifications as well if you happen to have the, let's say, the hard copy lying about. And someone commented on the bene, well, and we've had a couple of comments whether people should, the teachers should make comments like bene or other things to an exam. I think I agree with Marisa when she says that she finds it, there's no harm doing in that. It's fine to to make the odd comment as long as, to say, not the main thing is not correcting them, not correcting the mistake, because that could be quite off-putting. But if you want to say, it's a real conversation, so if you want to make it realistic and make a few noises here and there, it's fine. Now we'll bring on the first poll, which is Andy, if you can bring the first one, is marks awarded for content and response. Okay, so if you can vote on, well, so you don't have to pick a mark as such, but pick a band. Okay, I think we got the majority of you opted for the box 4 to 6, which says limited. Oh, actually, I just realized that the box is not quite right, 100% right, because it should be on this one is 4, 5, 6, 7 all together. Now I can, obviously the communication here was quite limited, and I think the box that covers 4, 5, 6, 7 does cover, describe it quite well, because obviously communication is quite limited, the response is limited, she's quite hesitant, a bit incoherent at times. She's able to deal with some unpredictable elements, but they're all quite basic. Now, what the examiner awarded here was 7. I mean, 6, 7 is about that box anyway. We're not going above the limited really for this candidate. Now, if we bring on, and if we can have the next poll, is the one for range of language, where we have, as we said before, the majority of the marks are awarded for communication, because content and response is a maximum of 18 marks, while the range of language accuracy we just have a maximum of 6 marks each. Now, if you can vote on this, so remember the range of language covers the vocabulary and the structures, the variety of tenses, variety of vocabulary. Okay, now the majority of you seems in agreement here as well. We've got most of you opting for box 2, which is also what the examiners went for. I mean, limited and repetitive range of vocabulary and structures. There's very short sentences. There isn't really much variety of tenses. Some of the vocabulary is unclear in the way it's expressed, or whether it's a lexis or the structure. It's really limited rather than adequate. If in doubt, the best way to do is just read it. You can pick a box and then think that that's the right one. Have a look at the one below and the one above and see how much of that applies. Sometimes it helps to make sure that you're in the right box. Look at the one above and think, well, no, this doesn't apply. I mean, like here, we can't really say very limited because she does offer some complete sentences, but equally we can't really go up to the 3 to 4 because it's not really, most of the scriptures don't fit. Now we'll have one more poll on this, and that's the one for accuracy, where again we have a maximum of 6 marks. By accuracy we mean accuracy of grammar, so the agreement, the number of errors made, and also the pronunciation and intonation. Okay, I've got we've got 11 people. Well, there's a bit more of a debate on this one. Some of you opted for 1, but the majority going for 2, and 2 is again what the examiner went for. I mean, there are many basic errors, but the main points are communicated. The pronunciation is not great, but is normally understandable, although in parts it didn't. It's a borderline with 2, but I mean, there is many basic errors with the main points being communicated. And again, we were saying the emphasis is on communication, and badly, but she does communicate something through this conversation. Now, so the final score for this candidate was 11 marks, 7 plus 2 and 2, and which puts last year was an F grade. If you have any questions on this candidate, do type them in now, because otherwise we move on to the next one. Alessandra doesn't agree, but this I'm not sure why. I know it's difficult within the chat to exactly express everything. Pronunciation was difficult to understand. It depends on how sympathetic you are, obviously. It was definitely difficult, but overall the message was conveyed. And remember, the examiners always try to get the most out of it. But obviously, remember, you may also come to similar results, similar scores in slightly different way. For example, you might have given a 6 in content and response, and maybe a 3, as some of you did, in range of language, and a 1, and in the end it sort of seems to be the same. The main factor is both of you agree that this is an extremely weak candidate, unfortunately, that scored 1 or 2 is not going to make an awful lot of difference here, but it's up to you. It's slightly subjective, obviously, whether it's very, very limited and you don't understand anything, or you do. My own impression is that some of it was understandable, some of it wasn't understandable, but parts of it were quite understandable. So that was, I say, the score that she got this year. Now we're going to move to the second example, which is an open interaction on sport and leisure. So if Andy, you can bring on the next one, please.
GCSE Italian Controlled Speaking Assessment, Sport and Leisure. The situation: an Italian speaking friend is coming to stay with you and telephones to discuss the visit. Your teacher will play the part of the friend and will start the conversation. Allora, ciao Imogen, com'è il tuo paese, per favore?
Abito in un paese che è vicino alla costa, che si chiama Pembroke. Abito vicino alla spiaggia. Dove abito c'è un bar, un castello, un municipio, un mercato, un parcheggio, un banco, un ufficio postale, un ufficio turistico, una biblioteca, una ponte, una chiesa, un'edicola, una stazione, una torre e una piazza. Secondo te, qual il paese ideale?
Il mio paese ideale sarebbe Milano, perché c'è molto da fare. Allora, cosa c'è per i giovani nel tuo paese?
Nel mio paese, per i No, nel mio paese non c'è da fare per i giovani, però si può andare al paese con amici e negozi, anche si può al centro sportivo e giocare a calcio, a tennis e la pallacanestro, anche si può il nuoto e l'aerobica.
Va bene. E dimmi, quali sport preferisci?
Mio sport preferito è il nuoto. Mi piace il nuoto perché è buona per la salute. Anche mi piace lo sci perché è fantastico. Mio sport mio passatempo preferito è uscire con amici, anche andare al cinema con amici. Mi piace fare una passeggiata con mio cane perché è divertente. Cosa ti piace fare?
Va bene, a me mi piace giocare al tennis perché è molto divertente. Allora, a quale sport giocheremo quando vengo?
Mentre sei in mio paese possiamo giocare un sacco di sport. Possiamo giocare il calcio. Mi piace perché è sportivo. Quindi possiamo giocare il tennis. Però preferisco il calcio. Mi piace molto nuotare. Anche andremo a nuotare al centro sportivo nel mio paese. Poi andremo al cinema nel paese che si chiama Haverfordwest.
D'accordo. E cosa hai fatto il fine settimana?
L'altro fine settimana o 90210 guardo alla televisione con mia famiglia. Anche fantastica. Anche andremo nuotare nel centro sportivo e domenica. Può ascoltare la musica pop. La musica mi piace perché le voce unica. E te?
Sì, mi piace abbastanza anche la musica pop. Allora ci vediamo, ciao.
Ciao.
Okay, so you will probably see that on your screen as well. I think you see the timing is 4 minutes and 52 seconds, so just under 5 minutes, which is fine. However, there is one odd thing about this. Bear in mind, this is an open interaction. Is anyone finding? Maybe you can type in what you find odd about it being an open interaction. I'll just give you a couple of minutes to type in. I mean, say this was put through as an open interaction. Now, Michele has said presentation, exactly. A presentation and discussion, but it wasn't really, I mean, it's been put forward as an open interaction, but really this is was more like a presentation. An open interaction should be some kind of transactional activity. I mean, this would have been done covering the same material, but within a framework like saying, oh, you work in a tourist office, say what you're going to do. It was said that a lot of people have been commenting about the fact that there was a lot of pre-learned material. Yes, there was, and obviously there's bound to be because they've got time to prepare and they know what the task is. However, that in itself is not a problem. It's just that it must not be exclusively pre-learned material. if you look at the marking grids, obviously you will see that if we look at some of the descriptors, especially content and response, 3 things stands out. One is interaction, interacts well, very well, some interaction, or has very little interaction, like in the previous one. There's the element of hesitation, very little or no hesitation. Hesitation in itself can be simply because it's been rehearsed and prepared, but obviously, like here, it's clear that it was pre-learned, because sometimes the candidate got a bit stuck and just had to stop and think what she was thinking, what she remembered what she had to say. But also, the one important descriptor is the ability to, or not, inability to deal with unpredictable elements. So obviously, if there are, one important thing to bear in mind is that if there are no unpredictable elements, it is the candidates will not achieve the top marks. So obviously, if everything is clearly pre-learned, they will not score that highly, because there's no unpredictability to deal with. So do bear in mind that if you want good results, your candidates must be asked unexpected questions. They can be something that they've obviously been, it doesn't have to be something you've never heard before, but obviously they must not know exactly what's coming, like sometimes was the case here. Now, your votes here are quite varied. We've got someone being very, very mean, giving them only 1 to 3. The majority of you being in 7 to 9 box. Now, Marisa's asking about the 2 questions. Yes, going back to the issue of the open interaction, this was more like an open, this was more like a presentation than an open interaction, really. But one of the fundamental requirements of the open interaction is that they ask 2 questions. And I think, I'm not sure what she did, but one of them simply was a te, which doesn't quite count as a proper question. And there would be if you put your candidate forward through the open interaction and they do not ask questions, they would be penalised for that, because it's one of the requirements of this format. Now, you've all been meaner than the examiner, because in fact the examiner, some of you were were looking at the 8 to 11 box, because there was some interaction. The candidate was able to participate in a familiar discussion, although it was obviously to a great degree pre-rehearsed. There was some hesitation. There was possibly some ability to deal with unpredictable elements, although it was difficult to see which ones they were. However, she does communicate the relevant information that apply to this theme that they've chosen. So the exam actually gave it an 11 for this one. Now, if we move to the language side, so if we have the whole range of language, where we have 6 marks available. And I'm just not sure whether the ones I'm seeing are the ones, no, these are the new ones, okay, coming up. Again, we've got some variety here, with one of you going for 2, one of you going for 5, but the majority opting for 3 to 4, which is actually what the examiner went for. It's obviously the candidate does use, the first part of it was just reeling off vocabulary with very little structures, but then she picks up in the second part and she starts using a variety of tenses. She's using the si può structure, she's used a couple of futures, so there is some variety there, so she's definitely in the 3 to 4 box. And if we bring on the accuracy, Andy, there's a question from Alessandra about how to vote on the same polls, so if you can clarify that. Accuracy, again, remember that we're looking at how many errors there are. And again, a lot of variety actually, it's widespread, but with the majority again being around the 3. Now again, the examiners were in the 3 to 4 box, because the pronunciation was generally accurate, but again not perfect. At times there were some odd things, but she sort of tried to correct herself. There were a few errors with endings and verb forms and so on, but overall, well, certainly, so it didn't deserve anything higher, but certainly it was more than just a 2, just the main points communicated. So as I say, we are looking at about 11 for communication, for content response, and 3 to 4 for range of language and accuracy. The examiners opted for 4 for range of language and 3 for accuracy. Could be easily be the other way around, depending on which you concentrate on. But that's where we are really. So the final score for this candidate was 18 marks, which puts her in the C grade. Okay. Now, if we don't have any questions on this, we can move on to the third candidate, which will be the last one for the speaking today.
Numero di premi. Jennifer Aniston è nata...
Tu parlerai di Jennifer Aniston, vero? Sì. Ok, quando sei pronta comincia.
Vorrei parlare di Jennifer Aniston. Lei, secondo me, è una fantastica attrice che ha vinto un certo numero di premi. Jennifer Aniston è nata l'11 febbraio nel 1969. È nata a Sherman Oaks in Los Angeles. Suo padre è di origine greca e sua madre viene da una discendenza scozzese. Aniston ha una famiglia abbastanza grande e lei ha 2 fratelli che si chiamano John e Alex. Attualmente lei abita a Los Angeles in America con Justin Theroux, ma non hanno ancora figli. Ha anche un animale a casa, un cane che si chiama Sophie. Fisicamente Jennifer Aniston è una persona bellissima e elegante. Essa si è manifestata in persona dell'elenco annuale delle più belle ogni anno a partire nel 1995 e venne a numero 1 nel 2004. Aniston prima è diventato famoso per la hit televisore serie Friends nel 1994. Lui ha svolto il ruolo di Rachel Green, un ruolo di meritato un Emmy Award, un Golden Globe Award, un Screenatore Guild Award e acquista popolarità internazionale. Aniston ha anche avuto una carriera di successo nei film di Hollywood. Il primo film di Aniston era nel 1992 all'età 23 anni, ma il suo vero successo è arrivata nel 1996 con il film Dreams of an Insomniac con Cameron Diaz. Da allora in poi Jennifer Aniston ha fatto innumerevoli film brillanti, tra di loro Bruce Almighty con Jim Carrey e He's Just Not That Into You con Ben Affleck, classifica numero 1 al box office nel suo weekend di apertura.
Benissimo, ok, una presentazione con molta informazione, ok? Benissimo. Jennifer Aniston, ok, quando ha cominciato di recitare, di fare l'attrice?
Ha cominciato nel film perché lei è attrice.
Sì, ma quanti anni aveva? 20 anni?
23 anni.
Ok, allora ha cominciato più tardi
Yeah,
nella vita.
allora abbastanza tardi.
Ho capito. E fisicamente come Jennifer?
Lei ha gli occhi verdi e lei ha capelli lunghi, lisci e biondi e anche è magra.
Uh-huh. E perché ti piace? Perché Jennifer è famosa?
Perché lei è fantastica attrice e per il ruolo di Friends.
Sì, è molto popolare in tutto il mondo,
Sì.
vero? E lei adesso è un'attrice, qual è il suo film più popolare? E perché?
Il film più popolare è Horrible Bosses perché è un buono film, è nuovo e divertente.
Hai visto questo film?
Sì.
È molto buono,
Yeah.
mi fa ridere.
Sì.
E lei, com'è la vita personale, la vita privata? È sposata, ad esempio?
Era sposata con Brad Pitt per 7 anni, ma sono divorziati nel 2005.
Mhm. Ok, allora vuole trovare un nuovo uomo.
Sì,
Ok.
sì.
E allora, finalmente, per finire, perché il tempo è quasi scaduto, lei ha progetti per il futuro?
Potrebbe avere più successo con il film, il suo prossimo
Actually, Annie, can you
film,
stop it here because we're going
Wonder
over in
Woman.
overtime. Well, the exam is in overtime. Right now, this is a good performance, good candidate, but the performance overall has been sort of spoilt in a way by the wrong conduct in parts. Some of you commented already on the timing. As you can see, I interrupted the recording, and this was 6 minutes, as the full recording was 6 minutes 45 seconds, so almost 7 minutes. And as we said earlier, the examiners will not listen; they will stop listening at 6 minutes. So anything that is mentioned after will not count towards the score, final score. Someone commented on a very long presentation, and indeed the presentation went on for 4 minutes and 22 seconds. We did say earlier in my PowerPoint presentation that it should not go over 3 minutes. If it does, the candidate is penalized, because, as I say, there's supposed to be interaction between the candidate and the teacher, and here it was most of it, the first over 4 minutes of it. In fact, the test could have lasted only 4 minutes, and that would have been entirely a presentation with no questions. So clearly the teacher should have stopped the candidate well before and started asking questions after the first 3 minutes. Someone commented on the questions. If you remember what was said in the presentation, the teacher actually asked a lot, tried to move away a little bit from what was said in the presentation. It was asking a lot of questions that actually were asking for repetition of things that she had already said in her presentation. The teacher could have easily moved off the immediate topic and asked her, for example, why she likes her, why she admires her, or similar things, rather than keep asking questions that are reiterating the same points. So unfortunately, this candidate would have possibly got a higher score. Overall she would see she's got a good score, but she could have got a higher score if the exam had been conducted 100% according to the regulations. So some of you, I think, have already been voting, but if you want to vote on the last poll for this on content, okay, now to a total of 18. Okay, we've got everyone. Yes, some of you were maybe a little bit strict, although the box in here covers 12 to 15. We are looking really at the 12 to 15 box because obviously communicates relevant information, she interacts well, speaks confidently, there is little hesitation. She appears to be able to deal with unpredictable elements, So we're looking at really at the top box again. If you're not sure where to be within this box, look at the one below and the one after, and really there's more in common with the top box than the lower one. So the examiner went for 14 here. Now if we bring on the next poll, which is the one for range of language, okay, we got, well, I got 10 votes to 11, but we're pretty much spot on. You all opted for 5, which is what the examiners gave as well. So there's a good variety of structure and vocabulary, but it's just maybe not top box, because there's a few sort of errors with syntax here and there. But overall, it's quite good. And if we have the final poll on this, which is for accuracy. Okay, we've got a majority of you opting for 5, with a couple being a bit more strict and someone being more generous. It's borderline. It's probably more borderline with the 6 than the 5, but the examiner went for a 5. But obviously there were some errors, but she did use more complex structures, more complex vocabulary, so that you know, the errors she made, they were made in more complex structure, not in simple language. And the pronunciation was good, intonation was good. So they went for a 5. So the final score here was 14, 5 and 5. The penalization is under content and response, because obviously there's, you know, we couldn't go for interacts very well here because there was very little interaction. If you apply the correct timing, as I say, she taught, the presentation was 4 minutes 22 seconds out of 6 minutes, and as I say, there was, for 4 minutes 22 seconds there was no interaction whatsoever. So she gets penalized, say, under content. She doesn't get penalized for language, but she does get penalized for content. Now we're right sort of in the middle of our event. I would just wait for the last couple of questions on the speaking. Otherwise, I would have a quick confirmation. The grade was an A. The total mark was 24, and it was an A. So we've had the first example was an F, the middle one was a C, and the last one was an A. So the themes are the same as we've seen for the writing, these 4 themes plus the sentence divider option, if you like. Obviously that allows you sort of the chance to stretch and challenge and suit the material to your students' ability or interest much more than traditional final exam. The students are required to take 2 tests, 2 control assessments, 2 writing tasks. And they can be word processed or handwritten as they like, but if they are using word computer, you should make sure that they haven't got access to spell checks or similar functions. As before with the speaking, the differentiation is by outcome, meaning that there is no tiering, there's no foundation high, it just depends on the outcome, on how those standards they write. We have said again that they have to produce 2 pieces on two pieces that can be on the same theme or on different themes, as we mentioned earlier for the speaking. And in total, each task is marked out of a total of 30 marks, 15 for communication, and then 10 for application of language, and 5 for accuracy. So there's a bit less of an emphasis on communication here in the writing as opposed to the speaking. Word count. The pieces, each task should be at least 100 words. However, those candidates that are aiming to a grade C should write at least 200 words. There isn't an upper limit, but obviously it's sometimes better to, the more they write, the more mistakes they make, or sort of go off the boil. So really, they can achieve the top marks, even just being just over, between 200 and 300 words is totally fine. There may be instances of very weak students that have difficulties in even reaching 100 words, in which case they can produce 2 pieces of work of 50 words each, as long as they're produced as one unit in one assessment session. Unlike the speaking, the writing is all marked by the Excel, so it's not marked by you. Obviously, however, you will need to assess the writing because, as we said for the speaking, 2 are the minimum amount required, 2 are the ones you have to send. However, you may give them more than 2 tasks, and if the candidates produce more than 2 tasks, then it would be up to you to choose the best 2. The tasks, like with the speaking, they have to be produced in controlled conditions, which means they can use a stimulus if it's been given to them, the dictionary, and 30 words of notes, again using the Excel form. Each session must last no more than an hour, so they will do 1 task 1 hour, and then another time another task 1 hour. As for the speaking, it can be taken out any time during the course, whenever it's suitable for your students, really. Now I'll go quickly through the next couple of slides, because again they're very much similar to the speaking ones. First, task taking. Obviously you teach a certain topic, you teach them the vocabulary, you teach them the structures, you practice the tasks, and you give them feedback, no problem. Then task setting rather than task taking, I think the title here is wrong, is obviously when you set the assessment task. Again, here you can only explain clarify the task, but you cannot give them any specific help on the language, and the candidates can prepare it in their own time. They can, during preparation time, they can have access to the course books, internet resources, and so on. Obviously, the research can be carried out outside the classroom. But especially for the writing, it's even more than the speaking, it's important that they provide an individual response. Although obviously the notes they've been working from are common ones, we really do appreciate trying to sort of have an individual response rather than everyone writing exactly the same things. Again, materials that you can use. Now, for the task, you can use, if you go on the Excel website, you will find some tasks set by Excel. They will be refreshed every 2 years, and as I said, you will find 4 titles, 4 tasks for each of the main themes. You can use them as they are, or you can adapt them, or else you can set your own. You don't have to use the Excel ones. You can set your own either in English or in Italian. Again, these, like I'm speaking, they don't have to be approved by anyone at Excel, but if you want to double check whether they fulfill the sort of requirements, you can email them, even email your question at this address, the Ask the Expert service, which is GCSE Italian @ExcelExperts.co.uk. And as I say, you don't have to do it, but if you prefer to have it checked, please feel free to do so. Again, in general, it's better to give a fairly detailed task rather than just a title. There's been instances in 2012 with just titles like Le mie vacanze, but to help your candidates, it's always better to give them a list of bullet points. First, because you make sure that they cover the assessment requirement, like variety of tenses, opinions, and so on. And secondly, as I say, it does really help them focus, and it's also easier to assess them because you're assessing them versus these bullet points. One word of warning though, remember that if how you phrase it. Now we've got an example here on the screen. The theme is travel and tourism, writing about a holiday. To say, you could just give them a title, La mia vacanza, but I wouldn't really recommend it. It's much better to help them out with bullet points like here, what you normally do on holiday, so it takes care of the present tense, what you did on your last holiday, so they can show off the past tense, what you like or didn't like, so some opinions. What was your journey like, if you like, again some opinions. Your plans for your next holiday, again displaying the future, and then what your ideal holiday would be like, a bit of a challenge for the better candidate. Please notice that in the instruction it says you could mention, the could is highlighted. Now that is it, because if you write your own assessment and you write something like you must mention, then the candidates that will not cover all bullet points will be penalized under content. Well, if you say you could mention, and in fact if you use the Excel ones, you will see that they all say you could mention or you may mention, then that means that you know, it's up to them. They can cover all of them or just some of them, and they will not be penalized for that. And as I say, this is, you know, your bullet points will make sure that you cover the assessment requirements so that the tasks are appropriate, and you can also sort of vary them according to the candidate's ability. They make sure that they cover a variety of tenses. They make sure that they express an opinion. By the way, as an opinion at GCSE, obviously we mean simple opinion, just mi è piaciuto perché è divertente, non mi è piaciuto perché è noioso. This already constitutes an opinion, a basic one, but it's enough to sort of tick the opinion box kind of thing. Obviously, if they can express more complex one, even better. Now, for the candidates, some of these tips are the same as what we said for the speaking. So again, make sure that they use the material, all the material in preparation. That they make it, and they use variety of structure and tenses, and then make it personal and not just copy from a textbook. That is quite important, you know, to see that personal input rather than just a standard pedestrian thing where everyone is repeating the same things. For support for writing for you teachers, obviously you can use or adapt some past papers. You can use the sample assessment materials. You can use the, as I say, for the real test, the real task, you can actually use the one on the Excel website. Now we have just half an hour to, first of all, if you've got any questions on the conduct or anything, how to set the task, do ask now. Otherwise, what we'll do, we'll move on again to some a sample marking. Okay, so this is there was actually a similar. Now for this one, you'll have to look at two different things on the screen. Obviously, you've got the writing sample, which is the top task in mio stage di lavoro, which was based on one set by the Excel, but it had been slightly changed by the center. And you need to scroll down the page to see the actual script. And at the bottom of the page you have the mark scheme that goes together with it. So I'm going to leave you a few minutes to go through, read the sample, and if you can decide, you're going to have some polls on screen in a moment, but if while you mark it, you know, at the end of it, if you think in your head, okay, what marks am I going to give to this candidate. You don't have to choose a mark as such, you can choose a band. So remember, we got communication and content covers, is basically how the task has been carried out, whether the task has been, you know, the content-wise has been carried out. However, do bear in mind that the language, the quality of language, does affect communication and content, because some of the descriptors in here mention the fact, you know, it's not just whether they cover all the points, if they're given some, but also how they cover them. So, for example, the box 7-9 box, we have comprehensible overall with some lapses, some ambiguity. So that the language, the quality of language does affect communication if you read the descriptors correctly. Then we have knowledge and application of language, which, like in the speaking, covers the range of vocabulary and variety of vocabulary in tenses, structures, and variety of syntax. And then we have accuracy, which is just the grammar accuracy, so verb ending, agreements, spelling, and so on. So do bear in mind those three categories, and if you can decide in your head what before, then we'll bring the polls on for you to vote. So take a few minutes to look at the first one. And Alessandro's got a query. You could include, it's open to omission. Well, as such, it doesn't constitute. If you phrase it, you must include, and something is not included, then it is an omission. If otherwise, if you think that the content is, you know, the task has been fulfilled enough, enough aspects are covered, then there's no issue of omission. Now we've got 9 votes here. I don't know whether we've lost someone on the way or they're falling asleep, but I will broadcast the results for this. Now, the majority of you opted for the top box, with a few of you are going for the second from the top. So obviously it's a very good piece, and the examiner gave it a 13, because if you look at the top box, there's obviously clear ability to narrate, communicates with no ambiguity, coherent and pleasant to read overall. 13 rather than higher though, because there are a few things in common with 10 to 12. For example, there are some lapses. Lapses would mean something where you read and it doesn't flow. You just have to stop for a moment because it doesn't flow as well. For example, sono sempre stata preoccupata per aspetta il motivo di fare il medico. It doesn't flow. There's something not quite right. However, overall, it is good, and it deserves the top box at 13. We sometimes possibly over-ambitious as well in parts. Although overall you get the impression that the candidate is able to express what they want to say, and it's quite articulate. Now if we bring on the next poll, please Andy, can we have the one for knowledge and application of language? Now one thing about marking, one main point to bear in mind when marking is, if in doubt, always start from the middle box and then work your way up or down according to how you feel. Obviously, in this case, it's a good candidate, so you can probably start already in fairly high boxes. But if in doubt, the middle box is always the best place to start, and then you work your way up or down. Alessandra is still going. Well, the omission to say it's not an issue here, because the phrasing was could. And the candidate has written enough words and covered enough aspects of it, because she's talked about what she has to do, what she's done in the past, what she's something about she's studying, something about her feelings. So really, you feel that the title is Il mio stage di lavoro. She has fulfilled the requirement of this. So and you gave her 13 as well. Exactly. There are, as I say, the examiners gave 13 as well, because there was there was some aspects of box 10 to 12 that apply to this one. That's what I was saying before. If you're in doubt between two boxes, or where to be within a box, rather, look at the one below and the one up, with the one up, because like in this case, you think, well, yes, it's definitely 13 to 15, but I think I'll go for 13 because there's something common with the 10 to 12. Now, if we bring on marks for knowledge application, some split between 7, 8, and 9, and 10. Now the examiners here went for 9, because it's a wide range of vocabulary and structures. Now if you consider this in view, I mean obviously I don't know how good your candidates are, but if you think about the average candidate here, there's quite a lot that goes beyond what we would expect in terms of vocabulary. Ad un pronto soccorso, per ottenere il massimo beneficio, per ciascuna posizione, da quando ero piccola is a good structure. Mio padre era capace di farmi, ok, it's not perfect, un stage presso l'ospedale. Mi piacerebbe vedere come i medici reagiscono a situazioni di emergenza. Ho anche fatto volontariato in una casa di cura. Ci lavoro ogni tanto. Gli esami estivi, penso che sia molto difficile. There's a great variety of tenses. We have present, we have past tense, we have passato prossimo, we got imperfetto, we got future, we got conditional, we got even subjunctive, and the vocabulary is quite well beyond what we would expect. 7 to 8, I would probably expect an average, goodish candidate, but is more like sort of common language and vocabulary. This one just goes beyond what is the norm, so she deserved a 9. And then if we bring on the last one, we have one more poll for accuracy, where you got from 1 to 5. 1 very many errors and 5 perfect, almost so high level of accuracy. Broadcast with 10 people voting. Most of you went for 5, and there's a ground for 5. And this candidate got 4 because there's a few things here and there. There's a few wrong agreement or ending. Farò un'esperienza di lavoro, la mia stage di lavoro. Spero, always with an accent. Some errors with the syntax. Above all, mi piaciuto, and above all, it's unclear whether this candidate is a girl or a boy, because in some parts she uses a female ending, and other times she uses a negative ending. He or she uses a negative ending. got a 4, but it could be a 5, as I say. But then some, again, normally balances out, because, for example, some of you gave an 8 for knowledge and application of language, but the examiner gave a 9. So it often balances out. You give a mark there, someone else gives a mark in the other category, and in the end, you end up being about the same. Now, for questions time, we better move on to the next example. And yes, and if you can bring on the next one. We have a candidate, and can we have the second example? Thank you. Now this one is La mia vacanza da incubo. If you scroll it down, here it is, and I can read out. We've got the note page. What you usually do on holiday, what you used to do on holiday, talk about your nightmare holiday, comparison to what you wanted to do, say what you will on holiday next year, and an idea of holiday. Now, there's a lot of bullet points here. Also, maybe have a think in the end. Oh yes, the previous one got, to recap on the previous one, she got 13, 9 and 4, which is 26. And it's definitely an A. I mean, she got both pieces of the same standards, it would be an A star. Now, this one, the next one, if you want to have a think about how obviously the task said that you could, so she didn't have to cover, he or she didn't have to cover all those bullet points. But I would like you to have a think about abilities and this task as well while you're marking. So I'll leave you a few minutes to think about, to mark it through like before. And then I'll bring on the first poll for communication. So just fill that one in when you're ready to go for the final, you're ready for all 3 categories. So that will give me an idea that will be, you finish the marking. I've got a question about informal and formal. It should be better to have, it's recommended to have different tasks for one formal and one informal. For example, write an article and write a letter. The main thing is that the tasks are different in nature, and also that they're different from the practice. If you give them any practice, for example, you could give them a practice run, write about a famous sports personality, and then the real one should be, however, about something different, about I don't know, a pop star or something. So I'll leave you a few minutes to go through this one. As I say, put in the mark when you're ready for it. When you've marked the whole lot, put in the mark for communication, so I know that you've finished. But also would like you to have a think about this task and differentiation kind of thing. Any questions about the administration I will cover at the very end. Okay. Okay, we got 9 marks put in. I'm not sure about the 13 to 15 that's there, because it was there from the beginning, so I'm not sure whether it applies actually to this one or not. But anyway, the majority of you is in the middle box, right in the middle, which is actually where the examiner went as well. And this is a very, very typical 7 to 9 box actually, because it's almost perfectly described by this. It's comprehensible overall. The task is completed. There's relevant information conveyed, but it's just comprehensible overall. And above all, I mean, the previous specification actually had a very good descriptors for this box, as it's been simplified to sometimes lead into ambiguity. But really, what is very ambiguous is the time frame, because the candidate obviously is aware of different tenses, because there are some examples of various tenses, but is not really able to use them appropriately. So she's using the time elements like l'anno prossimo and so on, so we have an indication on when the action is taking place, but then the verb the tenses are wrong, so that it leads to great ambiguity as in where the action is taking place. So it's a very typical 7 to 9 box. However, this particular candidate is very, there's very many instances of this. And so she's at the bottom end of this box, and the examiners gave it a 7, because obviously there's a lot more in common with you know, the 4 to 6 box has some ambiguity, the set is some ambiguity here. So yes, it was a 7. If we bring on the next the next poll, the one for knowledge and application of language. Now again, we got 10. Okay, great. There's some split between 5 to 6 and 3 to 4. Again, actually, this is a typical middle box. If you look at the descriptor in the 5 to 6 box, accurate just about. Some longer sentences, certainly, because she does try to write complex sentences. There is some correct evidence of correct tense, you know, or correct use of tenses, but with many lapses. But there is some unusual vocabulary. She could almost be a 4, but she does redeem herself with some other phrases here and there. For example, c'è stato un tempaccio della malora. It's probably all rehearsed things, but at least they're there. We have to reward her for it. So she got a 5. I can see some ground for a 4, but really, if you look at the descriptions, it's a little bit more than limited vocabulary, and a little bit more than basic and set phrases there. So it's more a 5 than a 4. And finally, if we bring on the last one, the accuracy one, I expect we're going to have a split. If you had some 4s and some 5s, you're probably going to have some 2s and some 3s here. And even some 4s. Okay, I think they somehow the poll is already broadcast. Now again, the middle box is the most appropriate one. If you read it is there is consistency in verb forms. There's a lot of errors, but the errors actually don't impede communication, and that is the main difference between the 2 and the 3. You know, in 2 errors impede communication, in 3 they don't. And really here, communication is just normally not there. And as you say, yes, inconsistency of verb form is a descriptor for 3. So this is really, all in all, it's almost everything that is in box 3 fits. And she just does try to use longer sentences. It's not just very basic language. So basically, final score for this one was 9, 6, and sorry, got the wrong one. 7, 5, and 3. Which obviously wasn't a great score, but she might have just about managed to see if she do the same standard. Otherwise, it would have been a D. But what I meant to say earlier was that possibly this task was not very suitable for a weakish candidate, because obviously she chose to do some of them, but some of these tasks were actually quite difficult. If we talk about your nightmare holiday, that's very general in comparison to what you wanted to do. So it's quite a difficult task that maybe would have been more suitable for a stronger candidate than her. Now we would have a third, on the system we have a third script uploaded, but for reasons of time we won't have time to go through it. However, if you want to make a note of the marks, I mean, it's an interview with an Italian-speaking sport personality. And if you want to make a note of the marks, you know, mark it by yourself, but let's say the examiner's mark was 9, 6, and 3. Obviously, the boxes, there's no correlation between the boxes, but it's often the case that someone that gets 10 or 12 in communication then is likely to have 7 and 8 in knowledge and application of language, and a 4 in accuracy. While someone that gets middle box would probably have no more than middle box in the other categories as well. As there's no such scaling applied, but it's just the nature of the mark scheme that it's often the case. We really have only a couple of minutes left. I just wanted to recap and finish off with the administration. Again, remember you will have to send off the candidate mark sheet for Unit 4, which is called CM4. There's a CA4 note form which has to be sent if you use it, but if you don't use it, then you have to indicate it on the mark sheet that it hasn't been used. And also a stimulus is also useful. You should send the stimulus together with, you only need to send one. You know, it doesn't have to be sent for each candidate, but just one for the center. As I mentioned before, a stimulus that's broken down in bullet points is much more helpful than just a title. So it's recommended that you provide some bullet points. Finally, if you can label each piece individually, ideally with the candidate's name and number at the top, and preferably also the center's name or number. Marisa had a question about the formal task, if they write an article. Well, they only need, obviously, there would be a title at the top anyway, because that's sort of setting the task, but it doesn't have to be signed. And there doesn't have to be word count indication, however, it does help, especially if it's accurate and not lying. But it does help to have a word count at the bottom. I think I've covered everything that I want to cover, hopefully also what you wanted to hear. There's a final slide just to recap obviously the first one is the address of where you find all the material. It's a web page about the Italian GCSE exam. You got a general subject advisor for the GCSE, and otherwise you can write to the GCSE Italian expert for any queries you have. Obviously, we only had 2 hours here, so there might be a lot of things that you haven't been able to ask, or it may be that when you go home you'll have a think about some of the things we covered and you have other questions. Feel free to write and ask the expert. And also, if you set your own task, you rather you want it checked, although it's not required, do send it off to ask the expert. Formal tasks don't have to include date address. No, it doesn't matter. However, the date is normally written. If you fill in the form, the mark sheet, it will have the date when you took the assignments, the assessments anyway. As I say, at this level, it just needs a formal task, just in the sense to say you're writing an article rather than a letter or to a pen pal or something, or you write a website page or similar things. But it doesn't have to be too specific. And obviously, we have a title that clarifies the tasks anyway. Now, unfortunately, time is up. If anyone has any burning questions, do ask. You've got a couple of minutes to do so. As I say, otherwise, feel free to ask, to write to me at the Edexcel Experts address,